For a long time, I've had a strange fantasy. I imagined a blind man coming up to me and shouting in anger, "You've been lying to me, all of you so-called sighted people. It's all a lie. Color, light, all the things you tell me you see, it's all a lie. You're all making it up to fool people like me." Either that or else you're just completely deluded. But I'm on to you now. Admit it. There's no such thing as light or color, is there? If there was such a thing, then prove it to me. I know. It seems so hard to believe that anything like this would ever happen. And yet, given all the truly crazy conspiracy theories out there right now, is this one really so strange? Is this any weirder than most of the others? This idea that all so-called sighted people are actually part of a complex plot to make blind people believe that there are things like light and color when there are not? The thing is, though, the reason I came up with this strange fantasy is that it reminds me so much of some of the conversations that I have had with atheists. "All of you religious people are basically liars," one unbeliever said to me once. "Deep down, you all know that there is no God, but you keep up the lie because it makes you feel good. Either that or you're all just kidding yourself. You make it up and convince yourself that it's true. Then you tell me that I should believe it too. Well, I'm not buying it because you know what? You can't prove a thing. Go ahead, try. I already know you'll fail." And he was right. I did fail. I could come up with nothing that would convince him that there was a God. I couldn't do it any more than I could have proven to that blind person that there really is color. I mean, think about it. What would I say to such a blind person? Would I say, well, there really is such a thing as color. I know this because I experience it every time I open my eyes. But for some reason, you happen to have been born unable to see it. I'm sorry about that, but I can try to describe color to you if you want. The thing is, I'd feel bad saying something like that. Could I actually say something of the sort to an atheist? Could I say, well, actually, there is a God. I know this because I experience that God every time I open my heart to him. For some reason, you seem to have been born unable to do this, though. I'm very sorry about that. I can try to describe how I experience God, and then maybe you'll be able to experience it too, after all. I'd find this just as hard to say to that poor unbeliever as I would making a similar statement to the blind person. I'd really be sort of telling him that he was deprived, that he was somehow deficient. It's pretty hard to do. The trouble is, though, I have come to the conclusion that this really is something about what's going on with unbelievers. I've begun to think that just as there are people who are born physically blind, unable to see light and color, there are also people who are truly born, I can only say spiritually blind, and so unable to perceive God. To be born missing either one of these is a terrible loss, but to be deprived of the second is far, far worse than the first. We can only feel sorrow for such a person. That's the only thing we can react, only reaction that's possible. They were born with a terrible curse. The worst curse there is, the inability to perceive God. As a result, they're missing so much in life. They're missing the very reason we are here. They're missing the basis of all love, all meaning, all hope. They're missing the very core of existence. Still, this can change. And whenever we meet such a person, we need to pray that it does. We need to pray that God sends them the grace to reverse the damage. Take today's gospel, for example. The man Jesus healed might have been physically blind, and yet he was at the same time deeply primed to receive Jesus' spiritual gift in addition to Jesus' bodily healing. It requires only a word from Jesus, and he opened his heart as fully as he had opened his eyes. What a contrast this was to the response of the Pharisees. They were so blinded by their own beliefs about God that they refused to see that God was actually standing before them and working in their midst. Now that's spiritual blindness. Nothing either the man, nor his parents, nor even Jesus himself could say to these Pharisees was enough to open their eyes to the truth. You know, we often use blindness as a metaphor for what is in fact, an inability to grasp the reality of a wider world. But as a metaphor, this link between lack of sight and lack of spirituality goes only so far. Personally, I think spirituality is often better compared to hearing than to sight. I wrote my dissertation in part about a theologian by the name of Friedrich Schleiermacher. One of his famous sayings is that religion is at its core really best expressed through music, especially music without words. I think this is true, and for good reason. Music gives us access to our emotions, and according to Schleiermacher, religion is all about emotions. Have you ever had a time when you were feeling down, then all at once you began to notice some music playing in the background so that you stopped everything you were doing and listened? And as you listened, your heart began to swell with a spreading joy and warmth. Then suddenly, in that moment, all felt right with the world. Suddenly you were at peace. Suddenly you were happy. Suddenly you felt close to God. That's what Jesus gives us. That's what religion is all about. To be spiritual is to be able to hear the music of the universe, the music of God. The more we open our hearts to it, the more we open our hearts to that music, the more we hear it, and the more meaning and joy and peace there is to fill our lives. Who would not want to hear the music of God? Who would not want to see the light of God? You know, there's a hymn that Sandra grew up with and loves deeply. As a child, she used to play it often on the piano. She says she played it hundreds and hundreds of times. I don't know the hymn myself, but Sandra read me the words, and these words express what I just explained perfectly. So let me close by reading the words of this old hymn. And if any of you happen to know it, feel free to keep yourself muted and sing along with it. It goes like this. Open my eyes that I may see glimpses of truth that thou hast for me. Place in my hands the wonderful key that shall unclasp and set me free. Silently now I wait for thee, ready, my God, thy will to see. Open my eyes, illumine me, Spirit divine. Open my ears that I may hear voices of truth thou sendest clear. And while the wave notes fall on my ear, everything false will disappear. Silently now I wait for thee, ready, my God, thy will to see. Open my ears, illumine me, Spirit divine. Open my mouth, and let me bear gladly the warm truth everywhere. Open my heart, and let me prepare love with thy children thus to share. Silently now I wait for thee, ready, my God, thy will to see. Open my mouth, illumine me, Spirit divine. Amen.